Hi, I am Sophia. Welcome to True Payback, where story hits different. Hit subscribe, let's dive in.
The reunion was held at Aunt Patricia's lake house, the same one we'd gathered at every summer since I was 7 years old. Same long table draped in a white cloth. Paper plates printed with sunflowers. Same family, older now, louder, a little meaner in the way that comfort allows people to be. I had driven 3 hours to get there. I hadn't wanted to come. My name is Elena Reeves. I'm 34 years old. And for as long as I can remember, my cousin Mark has made it his personal mission to remind me, and everyone within earshot, that I am the family's cautionary tale. I took my seat near the end of the table, the spot closest to the kitchen, the one nobody else wanted. I poured myself a glass of iced tea and watched the cousins arrive in their clusters. Mark with his wife Gina, his business partner Derek, and the smug confidence of a man who has never once questioned whether he deserves his own applause. He spotted me within 30 seconds. Elena. He said my name the way you'd say the name of a city you once visited and found disappointing. Still with the nonprofit? Still with the restaurants? I replied. He laughed. It wasn't a warm laugh. The table filled. The food was passed. And then, somewhere between the potato salad and the grilled corn, Mark cleared his throat in the way he always did before performing. I've been thinking, he announced loud enough for the whole table, about the difference between people who build things and people who just watch other people build things. He looked directly at me. I quietly set down my fork. Under the table I slid my phone from my pocket and opened my email. Here is what Mark knew about me. I graduated with a finance degree from a mid-tier state university. I worked for a few years at a small investment advisory firm that nobody had heard of. Then I left, or so the family believed, to work at a nonprofit focused on sustainable food systems. I drove a used Honda. I rented an apartment. Showed up to family events alone, without impressive news, without the currency of visible success. Here is what Mark did not know about me. I had left that investment firm to found my own fund. Quietly. Anonymously, through a series of holding companies that shared no public trace with my name. The nonprofit was real. I sat on its board and genuinely believed in its mission, but it was also, in a sense, cover. Not because I was ashamed, but because I had learned very early what money does to families. I had watched it happen once before. My uncle Gerald had sold a manufacturing company for $11 million, and within 18 months his 3 siblings had stopped speaking to him, 2 had sued him, and his mother had written him a letter calling him selfish for not sharing more. The money hadn't ruined Gerald. The visibility of the money had. I had decided I did not want that. So I built quietly. I invested in early-stage restaurant technology companies, supply chain software, reservation systems, inventory management platforms. I understood the industry the way Mark never had, not from the front of the house but from the numbers behind it. I knew which chains were over-leveraged. I knew which expansion strategies were fantasies dressed up in PowerPoint. I knew long before the industry press did which restaurant groups were one bad quarter away from crisis. Mark's company, Coastal Dining Group, had been on my radar for 14 months. He had expanded aggressively, 11 new locations in 3 years, financed almost entirely through debt. His flagship concept, a coastal-themed seafood chain, had performed well in 2 markets. He had interpreted that as proof it would perform well everywhere. He had hired a PR firm. He had started doing local TV segments. He had announced at the previous reunion that he expected to be at 30 locations by the end of the following year. I had smiled politely and said nothing. Because here is what I also knew. I had, through my fund's parent entity, become a significant minority investor in Coastal Dining Group's primary supplier network. Not in Mark's company itself. I had no interest in that kind of entanglement, but in the supply chain that fed it. Which meant I received quarterly performance data. Which meant I had watched, with the detached clarity of a person reading tide charts, as the warning signs accumulated. Rising food costs eating into margins. 2 new locations underperforming by 30%. A lease dispute at the flagship. A key executive departure that was announced. as pursuing other opportunities, but which I knew through a mutual contact had been a termination. Coastal Dining Group was not yet in crisis, but it was standing at the edge of one. And Mark, at the reunion table, was proclaiming himself a visionary. My fund was called Meridian Capital Advisors. It was registered in Delaware, managed through a trust structure, and had, as of the previous quarter, assets under management of approximately $187 million. I had 4 full-time analysts, 2 part-time advisors, and a back-office team of 3. We were not famous. We were not meant to be. Our investment philosophy was simple. We looked for industries with structural inefficiencies, identified the companies most exposed to those inefficiencies, and positioned ourselves accordingly, sometimes long, sometimes short, sometimes through supplier or logistics relationships that gave us informational advantages, without raising regulatory flags. Restaurant tech had been our sweet spot for 6 years. I had made my first significant return in year 2 when a supply chain management platform I had backed early was acquired by a major food service company for 48 times our entry valuation. That single position had turned our initial $2.1 million fund into something that could attract serious institutional attention. We were careful. We were patient. We were almost entirely invisible. The people in my life who knew, my business partner Sylvia, my attorney James, my best friend Dara, had all at various points asked me why I didn't just tell my family, why I let them think what they thought. My answer was always the same, because if they knew, I'd spend the rest of my life managing their relationship with my success instead of building it. Dara, who had grown up watching her own family fracture over an inheritance dispute, understood immediately. "You're protecting the fund," she had said. "I'm protecting myself," I had corrected her, which was also true. At the reunion table, Mark was now in full performance mode. He had pivoted from his opening observation about builders versus watchers and was now explaining at some length the strategic genius behind Coastal Dining Group's latest expansion into the Midwest. "The key," he said, gesturing with his fork, "is understanding that the Midwest is an underserved market for this kind of elevated casual concept. People there want quality. They want experience. They're tired of chains, which is exactly what we're not. We're an experience brand." His business partner Derek nodded aggressively. His wife Gina touched his arm with quiet pride. My Aunt Margaret said, "Mark, you are so smart. I don't know where you get it." My Uncle Paul said, "I always knew you'd be the one to do something big." I sipped my iced tea. Then Mark turned to me. "Elena, I know the nonprofit stuff is fulfilling and everything." He paused just long enough to make the pause meaningful. "But did you ever think about doing something more scalable? Like, at some point, don't you want to be building real wealth? Not just, I don't know, helping people feel good about vegetables." The table went quiet in the specific way tables go quiet when everyone is pretending they didn't hear something cruel. "She'll never understand business," Mark added, almost as an aside to Derek, who smiled with the practiced neutrality of a man who knows which side his bread is buttered on. "Some people just don't get it." My aunt laughed softly, an uncertain sound that was trying to be polite. I nodded. I reached for my phone. I opened my email, navigated to my acquisitions thread, and typed 4 sentences. I hit send. Then I looked up and smiled. "More corn?" I asked. What Mark did not know was that 3 days before the reunion, I had received a call from my lead analyst, Priya, who had been tracking Coastal Dining Group's supplier relationships as part of a broader portfolio review. "Elena," Priya had said with the particular tone she used when she was delivering information she knew I would find both professionally useful and personally complicated, "you need to see the Q2 actuals from Harbor Fresh Foods." Harbor Fresh Foods was Coastal Dining Group's primary seafood supplier. It was also, indirectly, a company in which Meridian held a small informational stake. Not equity, but a consulting arrangement that gave us access to aggregated purchase data. What the Q2 actuals showed was this: Coastal Dining Group had reduced its orders from Harbor Fresh by 38% compared to the prior quarter. That kind of reduction in the middle of an announced expansion meant one of 2 things. Either they had found a new supplier, which our network would have detected, or they were rationing cash. It was the second thing. Priya had done further digging. A public lien filing in Ohio where Coastal Dining Group had opened 2 of its Midwest locations. A delayed permit renewal in Michigan that suggested the local operator, a franchisee technically, was struggling to make its fee payments. A small item in a regional business journal about a restructuring consultation being conducted at the group's Charlotte headquarters. They're not collapsing, Priya had told me. Not yet. But they're in a position where one bad piece of news could cascade pretty quickly. I had thanked her, told her to continue monitoring, and driven to the reunion. I had not planned to do anything. I had genuinely not planned to do anything. But sitting at that table, listening to Mark explain the strategic genius of an expansion that I knew, with the precision of someone who had seen the actual supplier data, was built on a foundation of wishful thinking and deferred invoices, something shifted. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something more like clarity. I had spent 11 years being politely condescended to by a man who didn't know what he didn't know. I had smiled and nodded and passed the corn and let him have the table, the performance, the family's admiration. And he had used that time not to learn anything but to double down. The email I sent from under the table was addressed to my acquisitions team. It was 4 sentences long. It said, divest all holdings in Harbor Fresh Foods. Review our full supplier exposure to Coastal Dining Group ecosystem. Prepare a short position analysis. I want options by Monday morning. And flag this to James for legal review before we proceed. I was not shorting my cousin's company. I want to be clear about that. I was protecting my fund's exposure to a supply chain that was about to experience significant disruption. The 2 things are legally and ethically distinct, and I knew exactly where the line was. But I also knew what was coming. And I was no longer in the mood to pretend otherwise. The reunion ended at 8 o'clock. I helped clear the table, hugged my aunt, and drove back to the city. I was on the phone with Sylvia before I reached the highway. You sent the divestment email from a family reunion, she said. Yes. Was there a specific triggering event? Corn. There was a pause. I'm not going to ask. Mark announced to the entire family that I'll never understand business. Ah. Another pause. Elena, you know this can't be about. It's not about anything personal, I said. The divestment was overdue. Priya flagged. The Harbor Fresh data 3 days ago. I should have moved then. I was being sentimental. About Harbor Fresh Foods? About not wanting to be right about my cousin. Sylvia was quiet for a moment. Hey, what do you want to do? I want to review the full exposure analysis Monday morning. I want to know exactly how much runway Coastal Dining Group has. And I want to make sure we're positioned correctly before whatever happens next. And Mark is going to be fine, I said. He has his house, his car, his family's admiration. Whatever happens to the company, he'll land somewhere. People like Mark always land somewhere. That sounds like you're convincing yourself. Maybe, I said. But it's also true. By Monday morning, Priya had the analysis ready. The picture was not good. Coastal Dining Group's debt-to-equity ratio had deteriorated significantly over the past 6 months. 3 of their Midwest locations were operating at a loss. The Charlotte headquarters restructuring had involved, it turned out, the departure of their CFO, the detail that had not yet become public, and the engagement of a turnaround consulting firm whose involvement was being kept quiet. More importantly, a lender review was scheduled for the following Thursday. If the lender review goes badly, Priya said, they could be looking at a covenant breach, which means the debt could be called. Which means cascade, I said. Rapidly. I spent Tuesday and Wednesday on legal review with James, confirming that our divestment was clean, our short position analysis was within compliance parameters, and that there was no pathway by which our informational access to Harbor Fresh data could be construed as insider trading. James, who was meticulous and careful and had never lost sleep over any position we had taken, spent 2 hours reviewing the documentation and came back with a single sentence: "You're clean. Do what you need to do." I did not short Coastal Dining Group. I want to say that again clearly. What I did was complete our divestment from the supply chain ecosystem and position our portfolio defensively against broader restaurant sector volatility. It was exactly the kind of move any competent fund manager would have made on the same information. On Wednesday evening I called Dara. The lender review is tomorrow, I said. Are you ready? I've been ready for 14 months, I said. I just didn't know it was going to be this week. The call came on Friday morning at 8:47 a.m. I was in my office reviewing the week's position summaries when my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in 3 months. Mark's number. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 9:03. Then at 9:17. Then my aunt called. Then my mother, who knew nothing, had never known anything, and whose voice in the voicemail was the specific sound of a woman who has been told something she doesn't understand and is frightened by it. I listened to all 3 voicemails. Then I called my mother back. Elena, she said before I could speak. Something happened with Mark's company. What happened? I don't understand all of it. He said the bank called. He said there's a problem with I don't know, the financing. He said they're reviewing everything and they're not going to extend the credit line, and now there's some kind of, he said the whole expansion is on hold. He said it could be serious. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. He's trying to reach you. I know. I saw. Elena. My mother lowered her voice in the way she did when she was about to say something she thought was sensitive. I know you and Mark have had your differences, but he's family. If there's anything you can do. Mom, I said. What does Mark think I can do? Pause. He said he remembered you worked at that investment firm. He thought maybe you had contacts. People who might. I left that firm 11 years ago. I know, sweetheart. I told him. But he's desperate. I held the phone for a moment. Outside my window the city was doing what cities do on Friday mornings. Moving, indifferent, enormous, unconcerned with the specific weight. The family history. I'll call him, I said. He answered on the first ring. Elena. Thank God. His voice was different, smaller, stripped of its performance quality, recognizable as something human. Mark. What's happening? He told me. It took 20 minutes and it was, in its broad strokes, exactly what pre-is analysis had projected. The lender review had identified the covenant breach. The credit line, $6.2 million, the lifeblood of the expansion, was being suspended pending a full financial review. Without that credit line, 3 Midwest locations couldn't make payroll. Past the end of the month, the franchise agreements had a cross-default clause, which meant the entire network was now technically in breach. His CFO was gone. His turnaround consultant had, as of this morning, stopped returning calls. I need investors, Mark said. Real investors. Not bank money. Someone who understands the concept, who believes in it. Elena, I know you have contacts. You've worked in finance, you know people. Mark, I said quietly. I need to tell you something. What? I took a breath. Not dramatic. Just a breath. I didn't leave finance. I left the firm. Those are different things. Silence. I founded my own fund 11 years ago. We manage approximately $187 million in this. We specialize in restaurant technology and supply chain investments. I've known about Coastal Dining Group's financial position for over a year. I've had access to your supplier data through a consulting arrangement with Harbor Fresh Foods. And I divested our related holdings 4 days ago, before the lender review, based on the same data your own board should have been reading. The silence on the other end of the phone was not like ordinary silence. It was the silence of a room after something expensive breaks. You. Mark's voice came out wrong. He tried again. You knew. I knew what the data showed. I didn't know exactly when the credit line would be reviewed, but I knew the direction it was heading. And you didn't say anything? You just, at the reunion you sat there and you told the entire family I would never understand business, I said. I kept my voice. Even some people just don't get it. I believe those were your exact words. Another silence. Elena. His voice had shifted again, past the shock into something rawer. I need help. Actual help. Is there anything, is your fund in a position to? No, I said. No. My fund doesn't invest in distressed restaurant companies without a complete forensic accounting review and a clear turnaround path. You have neither of those things right. No. And even if you did, I would have a significant conflict of interest that would require disclosure to my investors. I paused. I'm sorry, Mark. That's a real answer, not a personal one. This is personal, he said. You know it's personal. What's personal, I said, is 11 years of being told I don't understand business by someone who was building a company I watched deteriorate in real time. What's professional is that I managed my fund's exposure responsibly, within legal and ethical parameters, and I'm not in a position to compromise that for a family relationship. He was quiet for a very long time. How much? He finally said. How much what? Your fund. How much is it actually? 187 million, I said. Give or take depending on the week. I heard him exhale. A long, slow, deflating sound like something letting go. The corn, he said quietly. I'm sorry. At the reunion. You offered me the corn. Right after he stopped. You had already sent the email, hadn't you? Yes. Jesus, Elena. Mark. Get a good restructuring attorney. Not the turnaround consultant. An actual attorney who specializes in debt workouts. Call your remaining franchisees personally today and tell them exactly what's happening before they read it somewhere else. And get your CFO back in the room even informally because you need someone who knows your numbers to help you talk to the lender. Pause. That's actually useful advice. I know what I'm doing, I said. I always have. The news broke publicly the following Monday. A regional business journal ran a brief item about Coastal Dining Group's credit line suspension. By Wednesday it had been picked up by a national restaurant industry publication. By Thursday 2 of the 3 Midwest franchisees had issued statements saying they were evaluating their options. The total exposure, the gap between Coastal Dining Group's debt obligations and its current liquidity, was reported at approximately $5.6 million. Not catastrophic for a company of its size, but devastating for a company whose entire identity was built on the narrative of unstoppable growth. Mark reached out to our extended family in a group message, framing the situation as a temporary restructuring challenge and expressing confidence in the company's strong fundamentals. My aunt forwarded the message to me with a note. So brave of him to be so positive. I read it at my desk between calls and set my phone face down. Gina, Mark's wife, called me on Friday. She was more straightforward than Mark had been, less performative, more practical. He wanted to understand what options existed. I talked to her for 40 minutes. I explained the debt workout process. I told her what to look for in a restructuring attorney. I mentioned 2 names in the industry who had worked on similar situations and came with strong reputations. Did you always know this was coming? She asked at the end. I knew the indicators were there, I said. I didn't know the exact timeline. Mark said he said you had a fund. That you've been, she paused. He didn't. No. No one in the family did. Why? I thought about Gerald and the $11 million and the letter from his mother, calling him selfish. I thought about 11 years of reunion tables and gentle dismissals, and the particular loneliness of being underestimated by the people who are supposed to know you best. Because I wanted to build something real, I said. Not manage people's feelings about it. Gina was quiet. Then, that makes sense. I hope he gets through it, I said. And I meant it. 2 months later, Coastal Dining Group completed a debt restructuring that reduced its outstanding obligations by 30% and closed 2 of the underperforming Midwest locations. It was painful and it was public and it was, according to the industry contacts I spoke with informally, handled with more competence than most people expected. Mark had taken my advice. He'd hired the right attorney. He'd called his franchisees himself. He'd gotten his former CFO back in the room. I don't know what that cost him. In pride, the professional costs were quantifiable. The other kind aren't. He called me in October to say thank you. It was a short call. He didn't ask about the fund. He didn't explain himself. He just said, the attorney you suggested was good. Really good. We wouldn't have gotten the deal terms without him. I'm glad, I said. Elena. Pause. I didn't know. I know you didn't. I should have. Mark. Kept my voice even. Warm even. You're going to be okay. The company might be okay. Focus on that. After we hung up, I sat for a while in my office. The city outside the window was moving. The way it always moved, indifferent and enormous and full of people building things no one could see yet. I thought about what Dar had said years ago when I first started the fund. We had been at dinner somewhere cheap celebrating the first return that felt real. She had raised her glass and said, to building things quietly. To building things quietly, I had said back. The fund's portfolio was performing well that quarter. Our restaurant tech positions had held through the sector volatility. Our divestment from the coastal dining group supply chain had been, in retrospect, precisely timed. I did not bring this up at Thanksgiving. I sat at the same end of the table nearest the kitchen and passed the corn when it came. My aunt asked about the nonprofit. I told her about a new program we were launching in the spring. Mark across the table said nothing about business. For the first time in 11 years we just ate dinner. And if that sounds like a small thing, a quiet thing, an invisible kind of victory, then you have never spent 11 years building something real while everyone who was supposed to love you looked straight through it. Some things don't need to be loud to be true. I poured myself another glass of iced tea and smiled at no one in particular. I had understood business the entire time.